The Chicago Bears can beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but they've got a lot to prove after last week's disaster, and we know Todd Bowles is going to come after Justin Fields.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Bucks and Locked On Bears, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Chicago Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am James Yarcho, deputy editor of SB Nation's BucksNation.com and one of the hosts of Locked On Bucks, joined by Lauren Cox, the host of Locked On Bears. You can check out both of us on those shows 5 days a week, as well as on Twitter. I'm at JYarcho_Bucks. He is at Cox Sports One, which is still my favorite Twitter handle of anybody on this network. That was very well played by you, Lauren. But this crossover Thursday episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. Biggest matchups, most important players coming up for you in just a little bit. But Lauren, let's start off with the biggest stories surrounding our teams. And as the home team, I'm going to defer to you to kick things off following a pretty brutal loss to the Green Bay Packers. So what is the biggest story surrounding the Chicago Bears right now?
Yeah, it's hard to narrow it down to one thing because everything went wrong. And that's kind of the story here, right? It's that it's not just one thing. It's a little bit of everything. It was poor play by Justin Fields at times. It was questionable play calling at times. It was a lack of running game, offensive line struggles, receivers not making plays, defense giving. I mean, you just start going across the board and it's like, oh, what do we need to fix? Everything. And that's kind of the problem. It's like, okay, the story is, can the Bears come out and like get their stuff together? Like, can they look themselves in the mirror and kind of shake out of it and say, okay, last week, for whatever reason, just couldn't really get out of the gate going. Can we settle in a little bit and look like the team that they thought they would be, coming out of the preseason? No one thought this would be, a Super Bowl team by any means, but they weren't supposed to come out that poorly against the Green Bay Packers. And they got to figure out a way to just sort of lock in a little bit more, be a little bit more focused, not give up so many penalties and beat themselves in a lot of the ways that they did against the Packers, and get back to where if you're going to lose a game, make the other team be the one that beats you.
Yeah, see, the everydayers for Locked On Bucks know how I feel about Justin Fields. I'm going to forewarn all of the Locked On Bears listeners here. I don't like Justin Fields at all. Zero faith in that guy whatsoever. But that being said, I certainly expected a little bit better of an output for him in week one against the Packers. I picked the Bears to win. I thought they were going to be able to get it done. So it was kind of surprising to see how that all shook out. And you take a look around the league and you see all these teams that it seems like every NFL team has that one other team that they struggle against. For the Bucks, it's been the New Orleans Saints. For Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals, it's been the Cleveland Browns. For the Chicago Bears, even with Aaron Rodgers gone, it seems like it's still the Green Bay Packers that they just can't seem to figure out. So I do expect a little bit of a bounce back for the Bears. Maybe not a huge one, but I certainly expect them to look better than they did against the Packers. And I'll have to say something that could help the Bears in this one is the biggest story surrounding the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and that is the offensive line struggles. This is something that I was relatively confident going into the game against the Minnesota Vikings that was going to get fixed a little bit, but in that first half, Baker Mayfield was under duress a lot. Robert Hainsey, one of my biggest concerns now is his inability to shotgun snap, and that could turn into some big-time opportunities for the Bears defense. A lot of snaps to Baker Mayfield were down below his knees, and luckily he caught all of them, but the protection issues, the snap issues, the communication issues, a lot of that led to some really bad play by the Buccaneers offense. So I take a look at that offensive line. I take a look at the Bears' ability to generate pass rush. Maybe not so much last week, but over the past couple of years, they've been able to get after the quarterback. And I think that's kind of a mashup here of potential bad news for the Buccaneers.
I will say the Bears pass rush this season is a massive question mark and a big weakness up front. So this is going to be like the movable object versus the stoppable force here, because the Bears could not get any sort of consistent pressure on Jordan Love. He had plenty of time to sit back in the pocket, and I imagine Baker Mayfield will be looking for something similar in this kind of a game. And but maybe this is the kind of matchup that can get the Bears going a little bit more in the pass rush department. But I think both of these teams in that side of the trenches are a little young and a little bit inexperienced and a little bit unproven there. I think that has the potential to be kind of a wild card here, where if one side's group can kind of figure it out all of a sudden, and this be the week that this is the matchup that they find the way to take advantage, that could be the kind of thing that can tilt the outcome of this game fairly significantly. I'm also concerned because I was just reading where I think it was an interview with the running back Rachaad White, who said Baker Mayfield picked up on the Vikings signals and was calling out their defense like from the line of scrimmage and knew what they were going to do all throughout that game. Like it felt like the Packers were doing the same thing last week against the Bears. They were always attacking like middle of the field, always find ways to get players open really quickly. And I'm also quite concerned about them being able to pick up on what the Bears do defensively, because it's not particularly complicated from a coverage standpoint. They're not trying to trick you all that much on the back end. They're just trying to trust their guys and their athletes to win their matchups. And it didn't work against the Packers with a bunch of rookie and second-year receivers and tight ends. I'm a little bit more concerned when it becomes the likes of Mike Evans and certainly a strong backfield in Tampa Bay as well. Like and Chris Godwin, of course, too. Like it's going to be an even harder matchup for the Bears in that regard, especially if Baker Mayfield can pick up on some signals.
Yeah, well, and it'll be interesting to see if he is able to do that with the Chicago Bears. And if he does, is it going to take as long as it did against the Minnesota Vikings? It seemed like that didn't really pay off until the second half of the game against the Vikings, when they were able to start fixing some things. But definitely something to keep an eye on for both sides of this matchup. But the biggest matchups in this game that are going to decide the outcome, that is coming up next here on a crossover Thursday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical offers the Jase Case. The Jase Case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jase Medical makes sure that you have medication in hand, and it is simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. I just got my email from a licensed physician today that my Jase Case is on the way. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using code LOCKEDON at checkout at jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com, promo code LOCKEDON. Thank you again for making Locked On Bears and Locked On Bucks your first listen or review every single day. Everydayers, be sure you are coming back tomorrow. Lauren will be able to finish looking at this game from a Bears perspective. David and I will be talking about the Bucks perspective leading into the weekend. But Lauren, every game boils down to a few key matchups. And for the Bears to bounce back after that loss against the Packers, what is the matchup that they not just need to, they absolutely have to exploit against Tampa Bay?
It's less about exploiting and more about making sure it doesn't go disastrously. The way that we saw this Bears offensive line struggle against the Green Bay Packers defensive line. For me, it's the big man in the middle of Tampa Bay's defensive line, Vita Vea. I mean, he scares you no matter who your center is, but especially for the Bears right now. And actually, I mean, we don't know for sure if the Bears might not just make a change on their offensive line this week. That's how bad it was last week with Lucas Patrick as their starting center. He's kind of their backup, but he has to start because their left guard's hurt. They move their center to left guard. Regardless, Patrick was the guy last week and absolutely did not get the job done. Can't anchor very well against big, strong nose tackles. Happened to be going against one of the biggest and strongest nose tackles in the NFL this week. It was bad in the running game. It was bad in pass protection. And I think that the combination up front for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers scares me across the board, but especially the big hulking nose tackle against a center who's he just doesn't have it. You know, he can be a fine backup who can fill in a pinch, but for a full game against a really quality nose tackle, I'm worried about that pressure, like right up the middle in Justin Fields' face, and certainly not being able to run the ball up the middle as well makes Fields' job that much more difficult.
Yeah, that's something I don't want to dive too deep into it right now because, spoiler alert, I'm going to be talking about Vita Vea coming up in a little bit. So I'm definitely going to piggyback off of some of that. But your concerns also go back to kind of my concerns with the biggest story for the Bucs, the issues with Robert Hainsey. You have a rookie at right guard. You have this kind of mishmash offensive line that didn't play together a lot in the preseason, and it showed against the Minnesota Vikings. So, we're both coming from the same place here, Lauren, where we have concerns about protecting the guy who's going to be throwing the football. For the Buccaneers, for me, the key matchup is the Buccaneers pass rush against Chicago's offensive line and, of course, Justin Fields. And when these two teams met in 2021, Todd Bowles dialed up some serious pressure on Fields. He was sacked 4 times, fumbled 3 times, threw 3 interceptions. It was a rough day. And 3 of the sacks came from edge rushers, but 1 came off of a safety blitz. And if you go back and you watch that Minnesota game, a lot of the pressure that was being dialed up, it was Devin White coming on a blitz. It was Antoine Winfield Jr. coming on a blitz. It was Christian Izien. It was Carlton Davis. It was corners and safeties coming on blitzes. So Todd Bowles dials it up from everywhere, coming off of a week where he was sacked 4 times and turned the ball over twice. Fields is going up against a defense that brought pressure from every possible direction in week 1. They created 3 turnovers against the Vikings. So if the Bucs are going to win this game, they have to do that all over again. Get Fields in a bad mindset early, get him uncomfortable early, a little bit rattled, especially in terms of his confidence that, oh God, here we go again, and really create some chaos for the Bears offense.
Yeah, we've seen Fields in the past struggle with heavy blitzing teams. When that pressure really starts to bear down on him, he tries to do a little bit too much. He tries to force things a little bit and can sometimes also then trust his legs a little bit too much to, oh, I can outrun this blitz. But when it's a cornerback instead of a defensive tackle chasing you down, even a fast quarterback like Fields, sometimes you're not able to fully escape from that. I will say last week, the Packers blitzed Fields 16 times and certainly sacked him a couple of times on those plays and forced a couple of bad throws in there. But he also went 9 of 11 for 96 yards and a touchdown on those blitz plays. When he was able to stay in there, see that the blitz is coming, know that I got to get rid of this quickly and find an open receiver, which was sometimes hard to do in that game. He showed some progress in that area that shows some signs of encouragement, but I'm not necessarily expecting that to translate to oh, he's going to be perfectly ready for Todd Bowles' blitz. No, the Buccaneers are going to get him a few times for sure. They're going to disrupt some things, and it's going to be on this Bears offense to find ways to get rid of the ball more quickly and work some shorter, quicker concepts to try and counteract that blitz. But much easier said than done when, even if you have 2 extra blockers in there to pick up 2 extra pass rushers, the Bears still couldn't block 4 with 5. So I don't trust them to be able to block 6 with 7 or anything like that. It's going to be, they can't trust their offensive line, especially when extra blitzers are coming.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I'll full disclosure, I didn't dive into the all 22 or anything about or from the Bears Packers game, but I did hear a stat that only 3 of Justin Fields' pass attempts in this game traveled 10 or more yards in the air. Was, out of sheer curiosity, was that by design? Was that an effect of how the Packers were playing defense, how they were covering guys like DJ Moore and the other receivers down the field, or was it, just kind of a giant mess like you've mentioned, and it created issues for Justin Fields being able to have the time to look further than 10 yards down the field?
Yeah, it was definitely a combination of factors. I think first and foremost, Fields wasn't trusting his eyes downfield. Like, he'd go through the progression and you could see him look, and he's looking at the receiver, and it looks like the receiver's open if he can just, throw an anticipatory throw, and he would move past that and come back to the check down when it was all said and done, where it's like, he's got to trust it, grip it, rip it. It might not be wide open, but he needs to trust that it's going to be open when he throws the ball, and he's still more of a see it, throw it kind of quarterback that hasn't made enough progress in that regard. But there were also a lot of situations where they're in 3rd and 10, and so the Packers are playing super off coverage, and there's just no one's open past the sticks, and they're intentionally trying to take that away because the Bears had penalties and sacks and runs that didn't go anywhere to get in these longer down and distance situations where they're not going to let you throw deep in those spots, right? I think a lot of his deep success in the past has been, they get 2nd and 1, so you can take a deep shot here and have a shot to go downfield and be aggressive. But when it's 3rd and long or 2nd and long, you can't have some of those same opportunities. So some of it's game situation, some of it's Fields, Some of it was Packers doing a good job defensively to taking some things away, but it all added up to not a very effective performance.
All right. Well, this Sunday, Lauren, who is the most important player for the Chicago Bears?
For me, it's DJ Moore. If the Buccaneers are going to blitz like crazy, you got to get the ball out a little bit quickly, and you need guys to make plays after the catch because there's going to be fewer guys back in coverage then. And so you got to get rid of it quickly, get it to DJ Moore, and let him work after the catch. Against the Packers, 2 targets and only got 2 catches on those 2 targets for like 25 yards. They need to get the ball in his hands more. They need to make him more of a focal point. It didn't seem like he was even that early in the progressions all that often. Like they weren't they were using him more as a decoy and trying to get other people open and not forcing it as much to him. I'd say force it to him a bit more, make the Buccaneers have to tackle him consistently and maybe even stop blitzing a little bit more if he's having some success. That to me, it makes him so critical for this matchup because he can be that guy who can take a 3-yard slant route or a quick little curl, break a tackle and make it 10, 15, 20 yards downfield.
Yeah, I mean, and there's certainly plenty of familiarity between Carlton Davis and DJ Moore, having come from the Carolina Panthers. He's had some really, really good games against this Buccaneers defense. So I would think that he would be the focal point of the offense for Chicago. For me, my most important player for the Buccaneers is Vita Vea. Vita Vea has to set the tone along the defensive line, especially with Kalijah Kancey probably not playing. He re-injured that calf that he injured in training camp, came back, played the first half against Minnesota, re-aggravated it. I don't think he's going to play. We don't have official word yet, but my gut tells me that Kancey's going to be out for a couple of weeks. So now they have to look to Vita Vea to collapse the interior of that pocket, which he does really well, but he has to do it quickly in this game in order to create opportunities for the edge rushers, for those blitzers that Todd Bowles is sending. And if Vita's getting stonewalled, it's going to slow down everything on the defensive side. It's going to slow down the edge rushers. It's going to slow down the blitzers. It's going to slow down the secondary. Everything will go through Vita Vea's performance. So if you allow Vita to not collapse that pocket, not get that internal pressure, then Fields is going to have time to make plays with either his arm or his legs. And we know Bowles is going to rely on his defensive line and edge guys to generate pressure without bringing the extra heat. But he's also going to give the Bears plenty of looks where he is bringing guys, linebackers, safeties, corners from all over the place and going to get after Fields, try to force bad plays like he did against Kirk Cousins in Minnesota and create turnover opportunities for the Bucs. So it all starts with the man in the middle in Vita Vea. If he wins his individual matchup, then the rest of the Bucs defense is going to feast on Sunday.
One notable injury update for the Bears, too, since you mentioned Kancey, their slot cornerback, Kyler Gordon, their second-round pick last season, hurt his hand last week against the Packers. The Bears still aren't given any real concrete updates, but that usually means not going to play this week. And it's a matter of, is this is it a couple-week injury or potentially an injured reserve injury as we record this on Wednesday gearing up for the game. So I wouldn't expect the Bears starting slot cornerback Kyler Gordon to be out there. And if you're looking for a vulnerable matchup to attack, the backup Josh Blackwell, encouraging young player, but an undrafted free agent last year is definitely ripe for the taking.
That tells me that Dave Canales needs to put Chris Godwin in the slot a lot on Sunday. But what has to go right for each team to get the win? And we give our score predictions. That's coming up next here on Crossover Thursday. PrizePicks is really simple to play, and I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and enormous selection of players and stat types are what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. PrizePicks offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. And now, PrizePicks offers Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account all season long. I had a rough week last week. I only hit 2 of my 6. Thanks, Bengals. So I haven't put together my picks for this week yet. But if you think that you can do better than I did in only getting 2 out of the 6, then go for it. Just go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, Daily fantasy sports made easy. Wrapping things up here on a crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Bears, Locked On Bucks. And Lauren, what has to go right on Sunday for the Bears to bounce back and get to 1-1 on the season?
I think it really does start with the Chicago Bears offensive line and kind of ripples out from there, right? The offensive line needs to be more consistent in run blocking so the Bears can then get their running game going. If they can get their running game going, it takes a little bit more of the pressure off of Fields, and they can work play action off of that to try and maybe neutralize either some of the blitz or some of the pass rush in general. And then if Fields has a running game and a little bit more of a play action game going and a better pass protection, he can be more comfortable in the pocket, can step up and deliver some of these throws and start to grow a little bit more as a quarterback in the way that Bears fans are looking for. And then, of course, if the offense is doing better, there's less pressure on the defense. They don't get as tired. And it really sort of starts there and ripples all the way out. But it's about making Justin Fields' life easier. And that really starts with that offensive line up front. And like we were talking about with DJ Moore too, where the receivers also need to make Fields' job easier by taking that catch, making some extra plays after the catch. I mean, teams are going to play the Bears off coverage. They're going to play deep and say, hey, you're not going to beat us deep. You got to check it down and try and dink and dunk your way downfield, because we don't think you can go 80 yards on 12 plays consistently if you're only going to get, 8 or 6 yards at a time. So it's about making it easier on Fields, and that really starts up front with the offensive line. And I think the offensive coordinator can do a little bit more to put the quarterback in a better position. They didn't roll out Fields very much last week. They didn't do a good job of helping the offensive line with extra pass protectors and scheming up plays to get the ball into their weapons' hands. So not to absolve Field of blame, because by all means, we talked about his struggles reading plays last week, but it'll be a lot easier if the offensive line and the offensive coordinator can also make his job easier, because love him or hate him right now, Fields is your guy. So you got to make it work with what you have at this point.
Yeah. And certainly everyone knows, as much grief as I give Justin Fields on the Locked On Bucks podcast, my co-host David Harrison, big Ohio State fan. I like to poke at Ohio State players as early and often as possible, but
you should.
We know that Justin Fields can create magic out of absolutely nothing. So, being able to put him in a situation where you do have DJ Moore contributing a little bit more, you do have Khalil Herbert, gaining a few more chunk plays and really setting them up for success on the down and distance, instead of having to rely on him to sit back in the pocket and make these 8, 9, 10-yard passes on third downs when the defense can tee off. That's a recipe for disaster, plain and simple for the Bears offense, for that offensive line, for Justin Fields. It's a recipe for disaster. So you have to help him out somehow and put him in a situation where he only needs a yard. He only needs 2 yards to move the sticks and continue to keep these drives going. I think he's probably going to have a lot of trouble doing that in this game, but crazier things have happened. I also didn't think that the Arizona Cardinals were going to hold a lead over the Commanders last week, or that the Jets would win without Aaron Rodgers. So for the Bucks, what has to go right is the offense getting into a rhythm a lot faster than they did against the Vikings. Baker Mayfield played relatively well, all things considered, but he was battling with very little time in the pocket, a lot of questionable play calling early on. And this week, they can't wait around until the second half to find that groove. It has to be quick, and they have to set the tone early in the game, find success in the run game to help things out. Rachaad White and Sean Tucker, they had plenty of opportunity. They just didn't produce with the opportunity that they had. So now they need to be productive in those opportunities. Like I mentioned with Khalil Herbert, break off 6, 7, 8-yard chunks to really help your offense going. And we all know an offensive line is going to start to play a lot better together when the run game is moving the way that it's supposed to. So you put all of that together, and the Bucks get out to a fast start on Sunday, it's probably going to lead to a victory for the Buccaneers. But Lauren, we both have concerns along the offensive line. We both have concerns about some of the things that we saw last week. Even though the Bucks came off a win, the Bears are coming off a loss. How do you see the final score shaking out in this one?
Yeah, with as bad as the Bears looked last week, it's going to be hard for me to come into one of these crossover Thursdays and predict a win until they can actually prove to me that they're capable of, I mean, obviously really bad teams, but like if there's any sort of question about, oh yeah, this other team they're playing against is actually pretty good, I can't sit here and say, oh, the Bears are going to, all of a sudden the Bears are going to figure it out now. Like I don't have enough evidence to say like, yeah, they're going to for sure turn it around against the Buccaneers. That being said, I don't think Tampa is a powerhouse opponent by any means. I think it's going to be a close game. I think both teams are probably going to struggle in a lot of different areas. And I think the way you talk about both offensive lines having issues, that means ugly football, and that means ugly final score. So I'm going to throw something out like a 17-16 Buccaneers victory. And I think it's even one where it's like maybe the Bears don't get that last touchdown, like it's 17-9 for most of the game, and the Bears score that last touchdown, late in the game, or maybe makes it 17-15 if they go for 2 and don't get it. But that kind of thing where it's not necessarily like a nail biter the whole time, but it ends up being a pretty tight final score and not a high scoring ball game.
I can absolutely see that. In fact, I had a guy on Locked On Bucs with me yesterday that said we're going to talk a lot about Buccaneers winning ugly games this season, because it feels like that's kind of how they're built, that they can grind these things out. And as long as the defense is keeping them in it, the offense has enough to be able to strike and win an ugly, nasty football game. I am going to go with the home team. I picked them to beat the Vikings last week. I said before the season started, they were starting off this year 2-0, much to the surprise of a lot of people. So I'm going to take the Bucs to win this one 20-10 in Raymond James Stadium. So Bears fans, make sure that you are coming back on Friday to join Lauren for the final episode before the Bears take on the Bucs. Bucs fans, make sure that you're joining me and David Harrison Friday night live on YouTube at 7 p.m. for our final preview episode before the game on Sunday. Check out everything that Lauren is doing on Twitter at CoxSports1 and on the Locked On Bears podcast. Check out everything I'm doing over at BucsNation.com and on Twitter at JYarcho_Bucs. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, enjoy your Thursday. And thank you so much for joining us right here on Locked On Bears and Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.